Council, please come to order. We'd all stand and we'll be led in prayer by Alderman Darrell Wilson. I make note that today is Flag Day as well.
Almighty God, we ask for your blessing upon the members of this council as we assemble here in this chamber to conduct the ongoing business of our city. With your guidance, we will strive to ensure that all our decisions are for the common good, and your inspiration is instilled respect, compassion, and thoughtfulness in all of our deliberations. Give us the strength and wisdom to lead by example as the people's representatives, and that the peace and harmony will mark all of our proceedings and keep the faith to the trust placed in us by the citizens of our community. Amen.
Amen. Alderman DeLucia, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And just for informational purposes, this morning there was a beautiful Flag Day program held at Sacred Heart School in Taftville. The entire school was outside. It was very nicely done. There were a number of veterans were there, and everyone escaped the rain that came there soon after. And as we begin, I feel like I have to explain something, and this is a meeting, a true meeting of the council, but it's also continuing the budget process from last week. And as per our rules, citizen comment and resolutions are on new business resolutions, not those under old business. I was reminded of that by our corporate counsel, and anyone who wanted to speak on those other issues, I apologize to you, but our rules do not allow for that. And I would note that this particular meeting was established just in case the state did not pass their budget on time, and it was a scheduled meeting in our calendar throughout the year. So this is not a special meeting, it is a general meeting.
Sorry. Number one, relative to the adoption of the budget for fiscal year 2021-22.
I would ask for a motion, please, to bring this budget forward. Alderwoman Gould, second Alderman Wilson. Is there discussion?
Are we going to get the revenue numbers?
Well, you all have them. Would someone like to make a motion, please, for the new revenue estimates? I would like that very much. Please. Alderman Gould moves to adopt the new revenue adjustments submitted by the comptroller and the city manager. Is there a second? Alderman Bettencourt. Motion before us is to adopt the revenue adjustments. Is there discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Nash?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
That's 7-0.
Motion passes 7-0. Is there further discussion on the budget as amended? President Pro Tem.
I'm going to ask the Superintendent of Schools and Bob Sierpinski to come to the podium, please. Hi, sorry to bother you again. So what is, based on what you've been hearing, what's your assessment of what's going on as far as these numbers go?
Kristen Stringfellow, Superintendent, Norwich Public Schools. We were notified last Wednesday that ECS would be increased by $1.3 million. So as of this morning, we presumed that this evening you would either, as a body, take a vote to either approve a 2.5% increase to the Board of Education budget or honor the full 3.95% increase. This afternoon, Bob was invited, I was not, to a call with the manager who spoke of a potential shortfall in Distressed community grants, our understanding is that if that occurs, that it will come in a different revenue mechanism called capital expenditure or capital plan monies. And so as of this afternoon, it was a surprise to us that we would potentially be receiving about $800,000 more than we did last year, which would likely not cover our high school tuition, out-of-district tuition, and contractual salary increases. So we came tonight not understanding what the mayor just explained as a part of the bylaws, thinking that we would have a chance to weigh in, having just heard this information today, and perhaps give you another scenario to consider, knowing certainly that you're being advised by the manager, and it is up to this body.
Yeah, our issue up here is that we have no control over the revenue estimates given to us by the manager. I mean, our approval of the revenue estimate was just pro forma, really wasn't necessary, it would still stand regardless. So they make that determination. So I just, the only reason I asked about it was so that it was in the record.
So I would appeal to the manager to say there are other options other than a drastic cut to our budget and yours. And that is to rely on some of the COVID relief money, which is earmarked already in your budget. There is $1.7 million that is attributed in the physical budget on page 48 that you have for federal grants to the operating budget. And that was, as I understand it, supposed to be from federal COVID funds, the other half of the distressed community money that you were expecting already as revenue. So that's already in there. So if you were to take the 1.3 million that you're getting extra in terms of ECS and add to it the 1.7 million that you already appropriated in revenue on page 48, then the cut to both the Board of Ed and to the city would be less. Another concept could be to make a vote this evening and have a caveat that says that we would be permitted to come back and request an additional appropriation when and if the anticipated infrastructure money comes in place of the distressed community money.
Yeah. My concern was as an accounting issue, if the money came in, like say, it was initially explained to me as an alliance grant, then we
have no record of an alliance grant.
So, that's or something similar where you could make a request, but if it comes in ECS, then we're going to cut $1.24 million out of your budget, and you won't have any way to spend that money. So that's my concern right now. So I'm just going to ask the comptroller to comment on it, if you would.
So since the inception of the Alliance District grants, whenever the state of Connecticut increased our allocation for education cost sharing, any increase has been for the Alliance District. So I haven't seen anything that would change that so far in the what I've heard from the budget or the implementer bills that the state is considering this week. So it's my understanding that the $1.3 million increase would be to Norwich Public Schools Alliance District grant, which is accounted for outside of the general fund.
That I get if that's the case, yes. Bob?
That's new to me, and if it is the case, then the Alliance grant would be increased, but that would only cover, say, the first 1.2 shortfall, not this one we learned about today.
We spoke to our representative last Thursday from the Department of Education, Mark Winsler, who is our guide to the ARP and ESSER funding, and he spoke to us about expending our Alliance grant, which had to be done a week and a half ago. He did not speak of any increase anticipated, so we just don't know that information if it is.
All right, my question now is for council. Should we find out that funding is actually coming in on the ECS side of it into the general fund, can we reallocate the cut that we're making from the
Well, tonight you're adopting the budget. This is the last night you have to do it, so you're going to have to make a decision tonight.
Talk closer, please.
I'm sorry, you'll need to make the decision tonight on what you're going to budget and what you're going to tax. If monies came in later in the year, you can deal with them then, but you have to make a decision tonight, otherwise it defaults.
So my question basically is, if, say, we got $1.24 million or more from ECS, could we allocate that, without impact, it wouldn't impact the, in a wash situation?
I guess it depends how you get it and what the strings are that are attached to it, because there's a lot of money that's being discussed, but there are rules that apply to the use of the money, including the APR money and the NRP money and others. So I hate to just tell you yes or no, because you're going to have to see how it is set up in order to make that decision.
And like I said, my concern is that, we're going to short the Board of Ed even more than we already have. So I think, like we said, you might not be in a situation to deal with it. So we're not, I don't think, right now, I will tell you. So the situation is not pretty. So I thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Okay, I think I know the answer, and I'll ask anyway. I understand the uncertainty of state revenue streams and timing and so on and so forth, and that the council has to make a budget decision tonight. Hypothetically, going forward, if the city were to receive additional funding from the state in some form, whether it were called capital infrastructure or whatever, to restore the $3.5 million, I'm assuming the Board of Ed could come before the council and ask for an additional appropriation?
Nothing would preclude you from asking at all. No. The question is what the corporate counsel pointed out. Under what system were the funds allocated to us? I'll just speak for myself right here. If it's funds for ECS or Alliance funding, I think it belongs to the school, period. It's never been in doubt in the past, and I don't think you should start doing that now, in spite of what we're facing because of the shortness of notification and how this information came to us. Those are dollars for education, period. That should not be in debate.
Right, I fully understand that, but if I look at the $3.5 million cut that the city sustained, that is not a cut to education or to any specific thing. It's a shortfall in the general revenue stream due to distressed revenue, grant, whatever it's called.
Distressed municipalities.
Yeah, so if you received an increase for whatever reason, I would assume, unless it precluded education or the other public entities that have been cut, it would be okay to, in good faith, restore it to any of those departments.
Because what we're hearing is that the distressed communities throughout Connecticut will be receiving extra revenue. It may not be called distressed municipalities. It may be called capital infrastructure. So the question is, if on Wednesday of next week, the council receives $3.5 million in capital infrastructure, that to us was the same revenue you were anticipating utilizing in distressed municipalities. So if that comes through, then may we count on the support that the mayor just described regarding what would happen with the ECS funding.
Mark, actually, you still have the floor.
Yeah, I know, but I.
No, I'm not trying to, I'm just trying to help.
I know. I certainly would support you being able to spend money that was allocated to you, but the question is, will council and the charter allow us to allocate money that was allocated to you? So that will be the issue. So, and that's the problem I have now. So, I mean, there are other options, unfortunately. I've been adamant about not overspending your budget, but I don't know. So this is one of those things. So I certainly don't want to suggest that, but you still have an agency to operate, and if that money is allocated to you, then I think you should be able to use it. So, I'm hoping that if you have an option, that I think it would be the smartest and most prudent thing to keep it on that non-ledger side of the budget, you know what I'm saying? So the grant allocations and such that don't appear on our general fund ledger. So that would be my recommendation, that you do everything you can to make sure that happens. So, all right, because otherwise we have very limited choices here based on what, the information we've been given. I have no other choice than to go with what the revenue numbers that the city manager and the controller give us. And that is not an acceptable position for us to be in, as far as, as far as the mill rate goes. So, kind of speaking to the whole thing. So thank you. I don't have any other questions of them. I'll relinquish the floor
Thank
at
you.
this time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will cite that I spoke with our senator this morning. She confirmed what we were told over the weekend, that that fund was not being provided to this city or any other distressed municipality, and that we should not count that revenue. And so that is the action we have taken tonight at this time. And we're taking actions tonight based on what we are allowed to do and what we have as knowledge. All of this occurred very rapidly and suddenly. Although I've read things in the paper that say people knew this back in February, nobody told us. I don't know that anybody contacted our comptroller or the city manager, and it seems that every other distressed municipality at this time, this date, is in the same boat we are. Where were the notifications that we should have received that this was not moving forward? They did not send any. No one did at that point. And I believe our city manager would like to respond.
Just a few items that I'd like to clear up, if I can. The $1.7 million that the superintendent refers to is in the general fund. Josh sent a memorandum email to the superintendent late this afternoon, because the question that the superintendent had at the time was, there's only 1.7 million. Basically, I'm paraphrasing now. How did we get to the $3.5 million cut? Well, the reason is that the 1.7 is broken out into two categories. One is a state grant, so it's counted in the revenue as a state grant. The other 1.7 was contemplated to be from the federal government, so that 1.7, if you look in your budget, will show up in the federal portion of the budget. So if you add both of them together, you get the 3.5 approximately. I certainly can understand how, if you didn't know that it was in the federal, that you could make that assumption. But unfortunately, that is not the case. At this point, it's a 3.5 million decrease. There's a good question about the Alliance versus ECS funding. If it's ECS funding, and we knew that it was ECS funding, and it came in tonight, or we recorded it as the ECS funding, then we would offset the 1.3 of the reduction that's in the budget now, which in revenue terms, it's about 2.8, because we were below zero when we started the budget calculation. So there's about a $2.8 million shortfall that had to be made up by expenditures. So if it was ECS funding, then I would suggest that we amend the budget, add $1.3 million in revenue to that item, and go forward. But in talking with the comptroller, we are not sure that that amount is ECS funding or Alliance funding. If it's Alliance funding, it can't be applied to the general fund. If the Board of Ed would want to apply that alliance funding to supplement the reductions, that would be their prerogative, subject to what is acceptable under the alliance funding formula. So there's a potential there to mitigate some of the funds. Then we talk about the extra funds. At this point, a budget is a budget. We asked the senator, and I've asked CCM, Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, about this additional revenue that might come up in the future. Maybe it comes up after the enabling legislation. I'm not sure. However, if it was substantial, and it was $3.5 million, the city at some point could make a determination that that money is or will go into the fund balance, and it could be appropriated, at least a portion of it, to the Board of Ed at some future date when we would have that confirmed. But I can't make a conditional budget tonight, not knowing if those funds are in place. I know that that would not be sound budgeting. I've heard that those funds will supplement the alliance, not the alliance, the funds for the distressed communities. But as you can see, things can change with the budget and with the state, and we're not always privy to the inner workings of the governor's negotiations with the Senate and the House, and sometimes we are the last to know those things. I certainly did not want to do a cut to any budget today. We cut the city budget by almost $1 million, and there was a cut also to the Board of Ed of about 1.2, 1.3. So we equally share the pain of these cuts. And I thought it was a good budget. I thought it was a good budget up to this weekend. We worked very hard to try to get confirmation that the funds for the pilot would be increased, because we had put that in the budget. That was the question that we had last week. Now, that was confirmed that the pilot funds were increased, but there was nowhere where there was an inclination that the distress funds were eliminated, at least nothing that the controller or I knew about. So I guess in summary, I'm saying it is a real $3.5 million cut at this time. It's not half. The 1.7 does not exist at this point. There's a question on the alliance funding. If the superintendent could tell me that that's ECS funding and not alliance funding, then we could make up the difference and make an amendment tonight. I could recommend that. But if it's alliance funding, then we don't have that as a revenue item. It goes directly to the schools and not through the general fund. And finally, I hope the superintendent is right when it comes to the additional funds. I hope that she's right that it's going to be $3.5 million, replacing the distressed cities funds. And if that is the case, the city can make amendments to the budget to supplement either the city or the education budget, not unlike what the city did last year when they supplemented the deficit that existed in the Board of Education budget. That was not done during the budget process. It was done after the fact during the budget year. So there's nothing precluding that to happen at some later date if the revenue comes to fruition. So that's I hope that clears up some items.
Thank you. Is further discussion of budget
Just a
as
question to
amended?
the city manager.
Please.
Were you looking for confirmation from the superintendent? It sounded like you were asking for that.
Well, there's been some talk between this controller and the business manager, but what the discussion that I've heard is that it's alliance funding. If it's not alliance funding, then we need to know that. If it's going to be applied to the general, what's funny about tonight? Nothing. You seem to be laughing.
You're asking Bob if he...
No, not you. The superintendent.
Come on up.
Say it.
Say it, man.
Don't laugh.
I asked Mr. Serpinski if he was aware that the Alliance grant was being increased by 1.3 million. That's what I was doing. When you were speaking, you said that Mr. Pothier spoke to Bob. I turned to Bob and said, is the Alliance grant increasing by 1.3 million? And he said he was not aware of that.
Unaware of any increase, whether it's general
Correct.
ECS or that?
No, we have been told, and that's what I spoke to when Mr. Betancourt asked me to speak, that ECS coming to the city would be increased by 1.3.
Well, if that's the case, then we can make an amendment tonight. If that's the case.
That would be wonderful.
I think that would be wonderful, if we can do that. But if it's not, then we'll have a shortfall because you'll have control of the funds and we won't be able to offset the mill rate, and we'd have an incorrect mill rate calculation.
That's what I was trying to sidebar with my colleague about. Would you like to ask him?
No, I believe your conversation with him is accurate. I have no need to do that. So you're saying, in summary,
Bob, you want to come up? Come on.
it's a very important.
Yeah, no, absolutely, it's important. I have no,
I don't want to
because
cause
this is something we've been discussing all weekend.
All weekend.
I haven't discussed potential ECS or Alliance funds with anyone. So it was an inaccurate statement to say that we had.
You haven't had any discussions with,
Not today, about what, I just know that we might have, we had confirmation in writing that ECS.
you had it last week. I know you had discussions about the Alliance
Not
Fund.
about Alliance.
ECS?
Yes.
Well, and you said that it was ECS and not Alliance.
I never had a discussion with anyone about the funds being classified as Alliance.
But you're saying now that it's ECS funding?
No. All I'm saying is Superintendent and I received in a written document that ECS funding was going to go up by 1.3 million. And that was last week. That's all we're saying.
Well, if that's the case, then we can amend the budget tonight and put the ECS
We
as part
can't
of the
present you
revenue
with
item.
an official state document that says that.
You don't have that yet.
No, I do not,
Well,
sir.
that gets to the crux of the dilemma. We don't have official word on a lot of these things.
And I fully understand that, and I'm not arguing with you
Yeah,
on
no,
that.
I'm not arguing. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. I would like to increase the education budget to put back, the original budget had 2.5% increase because it was a decent increase, and I thought it met some of the needs, not all, but some of the needs of the education budget. So I'm more than happy to recommend to the city council, if the ECS funding is indeed the mechanism for the 1.3 million, that we amend the budget tonight to include that as revenue. Now, I'm a little confused because, Josh, tell me how we've come to the conclusion that it's Alliance.
Every increase that we've received in ECS funds, so when they show us a report of all of the statutory formula grants, they'll show the total ECS grant, which includes a portion of it is Alliance District. And every single time it increases, the increase goes to the Alliance District portion of the grant. So over the last few years, it's been growing, between 1.1 and 1.3 million dollars. So this year's would be consistent with that. In speaking to CCM, I asked them, do I have any reason to believe this will be treated differently? And they said that they haven't seen anything that would lead them to believe that this increase in the ECS grant would be any different than previous years.
Are you comfortable applying that as revenue against the general fund, the 1.3?
Well, I think if we came into an understanding that if a month from now we find out that the $1.3 million were Alliance District grant, then, that $1.3 million of the Norwich Public Schools budget couldn't be spent because it's off to the side as an Alliance District grant, and there might be some restrictions where you can't spend Alliance District funds quite as freely as you can general funds, but you can only spend it once.
We would agree to that.
Yeah, that's,
You all set?
look, this is my whole point in bringing this whole dog and pony show up, is that if we sit here and we cut education funding, and Josh, you've read my emails, so this is not a news for you, but if we cut the money from the school budget and it turns out it's ECS, and we've heard it today, it's going to be a pain in the butt to allow you to spend it, or I got to tell you, okay, go ahead, go over your budget, and I don't want to do that either. So
We don't either.
Yeah. So this is what, I think this is probably the most reasonable course of action. But let me tell you, if it turns out on the Alliance side, all right, which is fine if it does, it's not, and nobody's fuck, is there's certainly some dispute here, and you guys go ahead and spend that money, the extra money, I'm going to have a problem.
We haven't failed you in that.
I know
regard
you
yet.
have not. I'm just making the point for the taxpayers and everything else. So, but I will say, Bob, Kristen, Superintendent, Dr. Stringfellow, all right?
Kristen's fine.
Okay. You guys have been great. You've been a breath of fresh air as far as I'm concerned. So I appreciate all the work you've done and the conversations we've had. So if we can make that change in the revenue thing, then maybe we can get this thing going. Thank you.
Alderman Gould.
So please don't walk away.
Okay.
I have a question. You think this is going to be ECS money?
Correct.
Okay. When do you think you will have official notification that this could be, is it a week from now? It's 10 hours from now? It's a month from now? Do you have any indication? I know you didn't get any official documents saying you're getting an increase in your ECS money. So Josh thinks it might be Alliance, and that puts us in a predicament.
Right.
But you're saying you think it's going to be ECS money, but you don't have any official documentation supporting that. When do you think you'll have the official documentation that could support that?
Well, with regard to that entire issue, and I think John and Josh, if you know something I don't, you'd be saying it. I find this year to be very unusual from a state perspective. Usually after a budget is passed, within hours or at least the next day, CCM, Connecticut Mirror, and everybody else publishes how did your town fare with funding. They list pilot, they list municipal, they list everything, detail line by line.
Right.
I can't find that anywhere yet.
Well, because the state pulled the rug out from underneath all of these towns and cities.
I recognize-
Think of the
so-
towns and cities that will now have to send out a supplemental tax bill in January because they were counting on $5 million, $10 million, $20 million that they didn't get.
But I think if
But we have
everything
to
were,
concentrate on what's happening here in Norwich. So we lost $3.5 million, just got swept away.
I think if everything were a done deal and they knew that document would have been published by now and we would know what ECS is, if there's something to replace distressed municipalities, we would know. Because I haven't seen it go this long without that
I'll tell you,
document.
that's gone. It is, I've confirmed that with the legislature. So is the mayor, so.
Yeah,
it's-
we don't, so
and
no
the-
one has
and
that
Josh, and-
document to
yeah.
say what all of the revenue is officially.
Sorry, excuse me.
Excuse me, Alderman Gould, you still have the floor.
Yeah, my apologies.
No, that's quite all right. Listen, we're all, you know, Sunday morning at 8:30 when you get a phone call, it's not always good, it's, you know, wasn't, oh, here's good news for you. It was bad news for all of us.
I mean, we all remember the holdbacks that happened overnight that no one knew about. And
Right.
we've
And
seen
all of
revenue
these other
come.
cities and towns, I don't think knew, despite what may have been printed in the paper, that they knew this back in February. How CCM didn't know this in 168 towns and cities in the state of Connecticut didn't know this is beyond me. But this is the reality we have. And I don't think anyone here would have a problem if a week from now you say, you know what, we got the official letter, here it is, we're getting $1.3 million in ECS. And we say, okay, that's the Board of Education's money. We don't have I don't think, there's one person up here that would say, oh, no, sorry. We don't. I think we could make an agreement, if it has to be a gentleman's agreement, then make it a gentleman's agreement. Or if a month from now, they say, you know what, we found the money for the distressed municipalities, and we're going to reallocate it. Then we go back and we look at the drawing board and say, okay, where do we need to put this? This is not any kind of, punishment to the Board of Education. And please don't think that, because we have worked especially hard to come together to work out the problems that we have. Especially hard, and I think we really did a great job up until 8:30 Sunday morning when we got an email that we're missing $3.5 million.
Actually, it was
in revenue.
Friday. It was Friday we got that one.
Or Friday, whatever, okay? So
It was a bad weekend.
we're all sort of sitting on pins and needles here. And don't take it personal.
So, thank you. The only official information that we received from ECS is a spreadsheet that I believe we shared with the mayor, if I'm remembering correctly, foreshadowing last Wednesday, that notes the increase that is proposed to the city of Norwich. But there was no proposed increase in alliance funding. I just checked with our assistant superintendent, who would receive those notices,
So
just to make sure. certain.
we've got our fingers crossed
We're
that
hopeful that that's
ECS
correct.
money is going to be coming down the pike.
That's our
And it
most
could be
information.
$900,000. It may not be. It could be 800. So I think we all agree that if you later on get a letter that says we're sending a check or
I believe
transmittal or
right,
whatever it is
website.
for ECS funding, it goes to you. That's your money.
Thank you.
Alderman Wilson.
So I think one of the other pieces that, as several have alluded to, is we've got two streams that kind of help us navigate this process. So we got the ad hoc committee that has worked diligently to keep the budget understanding between the city council and the Board of Ed at a good place. But I think we also have the subcommittee of the Finance Committee of the council to help with these parts of the budget as those things are figured out. I think as we've all said, this is something that came as a shock to many of us, and we have to deal with what we have now. But if we can come to a mutual understanding of those things, and even if it did come in differently, we've got a mechanism in place to work to make sure that those funds aren't spent or are spent. So I think, that's not the issue. We've worked over the last year or so to put that system in place to monitor each other. So I think that's the other piece that we have to remember, is we've got a structure in place to make sure that the spending and budget is within what it is supposed to be.
John, did you?
Yep, I
I'm
did.
sorry, the city
Yep.
manager, please.
If we want to reinstitute the ECS funding, that would be approximately, was that 1.3, Josh?
Yeah, 1.3.
I can only suggest the other part of this. I would suggest that the budgets be restored in the amount of $780,000 for the Board of Education and $520,000 for the city side of the budget. The reason I say that is the reductions were made 60-40 because the Board of Ed is approximately 60% of the budget. If we were to restore all the funds to the Board of Ed, then the city would be experiencing all the cut of the revenue shortfalls in this. And I think if we're going to do it 60-40 cuts, then if we're going to add back, we should do 60-40 adding back. But again, that is the prerogative, the expenditure part is the prerogative of the council and the way they would want to do that. But that would be my suggestion. So, Mr. Controller, are you comfortable adding that 1.3 to the revenue?
Yeah, I think that, we have an understanding with the superintendent and business manager about, if something were to, new information were to come down the line, that we could adjust the budget accordingly.
Well, I think that's great news if we do that. So I would have to make, how would you do that to make a motion? I don't make motions, so.
I just
If
wanted
the
to be-
corporate counsel could have the floor, please.
I just wanted to be clear on the record that in adopting the budget, Section 9 of Chapter 7 provides that the council shall not alter the estimate of revenues of the chief executive officer of the city except to correct omissions or mathematical errors. And then it goes on that the council may decrease expenditures. So as long as the city manager and the comptroller are comfortable that the not inclusion of this money is an omission, I think it can be added as revenue. But I don't think the council can add it on their own.
No, I'm
No,
not
no,
saying
that's
that.
not that's not.
No, I'm saying that
That's fine then.
that the administration would adjust the revenue estimates to include the 1.3 as general fund revenue, as opposed to alliance funding, which would be the sole prerogative of the
Board of Ed.
Board of Ed.
Then I think that works.
And as far as what the city does with the expenditure side, that's up to the city council then. I'm suggesting 60-40. We made some significant cuts in the city budget, as the council knows, so I would respectfully request that reinstatement, but I understand my limitations on that and just can make the suggestion on that. So, however you want, Corporation Council, us to amend that now, and then they would amend the revenue number that they had passed earlier tonight, then. I want to get the right sequence.
I don't think they've adopted the revenue number yet. I think they amended it. We're dealing, I believe, still with the first resolution.
Yes.
So that was the first proposal, is what the revenue number was. It was amended downward, recognizing the changes you proposed. It could be again amended upward to get to a revenue figure.
How would I put that on the table then?
Pardon?
You can just report it out, really.
Yeah, you make a motion, somebody has to make a motion to,
I would make a motion to accept the city manager's recommendation on the revenue change.
Amended
1.3, amended recommendation.
Just for clarity, we had a motion on expenditures. Could the makers of those motions withdraw that and clear the table for that motion?
Well, we
Yes.
haven't even gotten to expenditures yet. You don't even need to do that yet.
I asked for motions and two people put it on the floor, so it's still in front of us.
Didn't we vote on that?
We haven't voted that down.
On the amendment?
We haven't voted it up either. The expenditure cut was a separate motion I asked for. Two people put it on the floor, I recall.
Is that where we're at?
Yeah.
I'm just asking those people to withdraw that motion, that's all. Just so it's clear. Whoever made those.
Gould and Benton Gould.
All right,
Could
good.
please, those motion, consider withdrawn by
Yes.
the maker and the
Yes.
second? Thank you. Now, the floor is clear.
Okay. Not sure where we're at.
No?
So we're talking about the revenue piece. So a motion that we,
You're looking to amend the revenue adjustments as amended.
Then we would not cut 1.3 of that, so
Yeah.
the new revenue item.
so the new revenue item is a reduction of $1.678 million.
No, that's not,
Isn't it?
that's my lousy print.
That's 1.3. That's-
1.3, that's all. I mean, I think it's.
Well, I was
relative to
taking it, I
1.3.
was just totaling it up. in my
Okay,
head.
okay.
So that the new estimate is a reduction in revenue of total of $1.678980 million, correct? So I would
Okay,
make
the
that
motion before us is to amend the revenue adjustments as amended to reflect that the total revenue change is now $1,678,980. Motion made by Betancourt. Is there a second? Gould. Thank you.
Are any of the other line items in the revenue adjustment schedule changed?
We'll get to that.
So can I ask a question?
Question, absolutely. Yes, Alderman Nash.
Are we putting money back in we don't have yet, hoping that we have it?
Possibly.
So how are we doing that?
We know it's coming in,
We don't know that. Yeah, so why are we putting it back if we don't know we got it? We can always put it back next week.
No, we
can-
can't.
Why?
Because you can't spend it then.
You can't spend, so if we get this money next week, we're like, oh, we're just gonna put it in the
It
bank.
goes into the fund balance.
So- And you can't designate the fund balance and say we wanna put it
At
on
some
there?
future date,
That's
yeah.
what I'm
the
saying.
future.
So-
Yeah, next
so
year.
So we're gonna put money back into this that we don't have yet, hoping we get it. And when we don't get it, we gotta go to the undesignated balance fund to put it back in.
May I
Is-
answer?
Please.
Please help me, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to,
I'm begging
not,
for help.
I don't want to overspeak anybody.
That's okay.
Our understanding, just like we make estimates on all the revenue, is that we are receiving 1.3 million. The only debate was whether it was Alliance money. If it's Alliance money, it doesn't go through the general fund, it goes directly to the education department. Therefore, I couldn't credit that amount to the general fund and the tax base number. We're confident that there is a 1.3 million increase. The only question tonight was whether it was Alliance funding or ECS funding. ECS funding goes through the general fund revenue. So that's what we're correcting tonight. I don't think there's a debate that there was 1.3 million coming to the city. The question is in what manner was it coming, as Alliance or ECS?
Okay.
I'm hearing
So
from
we'll
the-
not be taking money out of the undesignated balance fund to cover something that
No.
all of a sudden we realize, oh, we don't, okay.
No.
All right, that's all I want to know. Thank you. I appreciate that explanation.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it helps me.
Superintendent? Is that correct? Is that correct? Is that how you understand it? Okay.
Searching for it feverishly. Praying it's like going to be delivered by.
I'll join you in that.
Okay, I'm happy.
The motion before us is to reduce the revenue adjustment again. And I have a question. If we're counting on this funds finally getting notification that it's ECS funding, all of that should be with the schools and not be split. And it's contradictory to what I said earlier, at least for myself, and I only speak for myself. ECS money belongs to the schools. We're now taking 40% of that and applying it to the city. I'm going to say that's not right.
May I?
Please, please.
Normally, we don't, when general fund revenue comes in, it's general fund revenue. We only have one tax rate, therefore, all the revenue that comes into the general fund is general fund revenue. It's not earmarked for the Board of Education or the city, it's general fund revenue. So there's no caveat that says all 37 million of whatever the ECS funding is, 39, I forget what the number is solely allocated to Board of Ed. It's allocated to the general fund revenue, which is then calculated, the mill rate, through the revenue. But it's not earmarked specifically for that. That's what they have the Alliance grant for, I believe. Then it's earmarked directly for them, and they spend that money. But again, you could.
I have to respond. I sat 18 years in the State House of Representatives when the grants were calculated. Funds that went to the schools were under the ECS grant allocation and line item in the state budget. At no time were those funds ever anticipated to be used for any other purpose other than education of our kids. The Alliance grant has been a gain and a loss for this city of Norwich and anyone else in that district, because as they increase Alliance grant funds, they did not keep pace with the local education cost-sharing formula. And it was actually taken from the allocation that we should have had those other years in that other category. You say it's not, it goes in the general fund, and I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to argue with you, but it's supposed to be for the kids and their education. Period. If you're going to tell me that prior city managers took some of those grants and applied it somewhere else, then there's a problem here.
No, there's not taking anything. It becomes part of the total general fund revenue. And their expenditures get allocated because of their expenditures. The revenue is the revenue. Now, when we reduce something, we don't reduce something based on they didn't get enough of ECS funding this year. The net budget for the Board of Education is not their expenditures less ECS. It's their budget, 80, whatever that number is, 80-something million. It's not 80-something million minus 39 or whatever that number is. It's because it's one mill rate. Yes.
Can I just offer a different perspective? I agree with, I'm not a policymaker, obviously, but I agree with both of what you're saying, but I think we have a practical problem if we don't apply all of the $1.3 million to education, because if it turns out that $1.3 million is Alliance District, you're going to peel off $1.3 million of revenues, and
There you go.
less than $1.3 million of education expenditures, and then they're going to get all $1.3 million in Alliance District funds, and that, $400,000, $500,000 of ECS funding, which was helping support general government expenditures, will not be there. So it's kind of you have a parallel problem there.
Well, that's because of the Alliance funding question mark.
Right, because of the question mark.
Actually, that makes sense, if I may.
Alderman Becker, please.
Mayor, I'm going to agree absolutely with you. So, this is, for me, it's simply a decision, I'm not trying to underfund education. It's, it's kind of a bedrock in a way, I think, in the community. So if we have any intent at all at building a better city of Norwich, then, we need to at least make sure they have the money to do the job. And my main fear here was that we were going to cut and them not have the ability to replace those funds in another manner. Although I know, Josh, that was not your intent. That was, certainly not. I recognize that, you and the city manager. But the problem for me is that I'm kind of looking for guarantees in a place where there's no guarantees. So, and that, I think, thank you for having the conversation with us today. So, so at this point, I think, let's get this done. So,
As I said in the beginning, Mayor, the 780 and the 520 were just suggestions from the city manager. I made it very clear that the council can do anything they want with that 1.3 million. That's the first thing I said.
yeah.
I made the suggestion that they could be pro rata, because now the city will be losing the bulk of the expenditure side. And I try to defend both sides if I can to make it equal. But in no way am I trying to usurp the prerogatives of the city council. They can do anything they want with the 1.3 million.
Thank you. This discussion reminds me of battles on the floor of the House and Senate, and you end up going down a path where the minimum budget requirement has been alleged to have been violated by a community or town, and I would not want the city of Norwich to fall in that discussion. And I think we are dangerously approaching that if you're splitting the dollars that are right now assumed to be ECS and a percentage is being taken over, because we end up going less than what we had allocated the prior year, and then you get in trouble because there's a penalty, and I don't think that penalty has ever been removed. You lose $1 of city support, you lose $2 next year from the state. I don't think we should be doing this. I'm not supporting this amendment.
You're talking about,
Splitting 60/40,
yeah.
the number,
Okay.
yeah.
No, that was just a suggestion. That was not a formal amendment.
Well, I don't want people voting for this with the understanding they get to do that later tonight.
Well, they have the option if they want.
Not with my vote.
oh my.
Sorry, get a little up. There's a motion before us. Is there further discussion? Does anyone need to have the motion restated for clarity?
Thank you. Would
You
you
bet.
please?
I need it too.
I believe it is to amend the reduction in the revenue adjustment by $1,697,980.
The change is 1.3.
To change, sorry, to change. By 1.3, bringing it down to that.
Further discussion?
And nowhere in that emotion is there earmarking.
No earmarking.
Okay, that's all of them.
It's, okay. Roll call, sorry, Alderman Gould.
But I just want to make sure that we have an understanding that if this money doesn't come through,
Yeah.
okay, everybody, I don't want anybody to
They
say later
agree.
on, oh, wait a minute. No, there was no caveat here.
They agreed,
If we
we
don't get
agreed.
any, if you don't get any extra money, official notification,
They're not,
okay.
yes.
I want everybody just to, to all be on the same page here. Thank you.
Alderman Delucia.
So, all right, so I just want to be clear because I heard half the statement said. If the money doesn't come in, fill in the blank.
You're not getting it.
The Board of Ed's not getting it.
The Board of Education.
We're not going to be taking it out on designated fund balance or anywhere else.
If you don't get the official letter that says you're getting X
Whatever.
amount of dollars, you're not getting it. In educational cost sharing.
Thank you.
Alderman Wilson.
But also, we have the understanding that it could also come in as Alliance District funding as well.
That's what the case we're talking about
Okay,
here.
I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
If it's not general fund.
Correct.
Then they don't spend that money we're allocating tonight. We have an understanding? Just say yes. Yes, okay, good. All right. Thank you.
I think my confusion is, my understanding is Josh gets the letter and city,
Yeah.
the whole world will get.
Whoever gets the official letter, okay, if it's Chief Daley, you will disseminate it.
All right.
Right after a finder's fee, right?
That's it.
20, 40%.
All right.
Roll call,
We
please.
needed that.
Alderman DeLucia.
Yes. Sorry.
Oh.
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles.
Yes.
Alderman Wilson.
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould.
Yes.
Alderman Nash.
Yes.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt.
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom.
Yes.
That's 7-0.
Don't think it's yet.
Motion to amend has passed. Are there further discussion on the budget as amended? Alderman Bettencourt.
I had a motion to introduce the expenditure cuts and put those on the table as an amendment to the budget. It was submitted by the city manager.
Is there a second? Alderman Nash. Further discussion? Yes.
Actually, I have a question.
I'm sorry, he still has the floor as the maker of the motion.
All right. I also want to, so I would like to amend that, the expenditure cuts, to remove number 16, the reduction in Norwich Public Schools funding of $1.24 million.
Could you say that amount again?
1.240000. It's line 16 in its entirety.
Thank you.
Is that a motion by,
It's a motion to amend the amendment.
how about if you move to put the
Or we could do
expenditure
division.
cuts, well, as presented by the city manager on the floor
There it is.
with the caveat that item 16 is removed? Make it
We
one
can do
motion,
just a
it's just
division.
cleaner.
Okay,
I think it's cleaner.
we could just divide the question. So doesn't matter, any council.
Either way,
can-
your
yeah,
motion
so-
to divide is always in order.
Motion, yeah, so there's no motion necessary. I'd like to divide the question. Items 1 through 15 is one
Mm-hmm.
piece, and then item 16 to be voted on separately.
Understood. Second to that, please?
There's no, no necessary, just the division. It's division.
You want it part of
It's
the
allowed
one?
under the rules.
Just part of the
Yeah.
one, okay.
Allowed under the rules.
Is there discussion on items 1 through 15? Alderman DeLucia.
Thank you. Obviously, we are removing a number of things from the budget because we were dealt a curveball very late in the game here, and we've had to make some extremely difficult choices. Most troubling for me is item number 2, which, as you all know, I fought for, and item number 3, which, again, I have fought for. But we're making these cuts to be the responsible people that we said we would be when it came to the budget. And we can't lose $3.5 million in revenue without feeling some pain and without living without things that we didn't want to do. But as I look down this list, and I know I highlighted 2, but the list in its full entirety, these are all things that were important to this council and important to this city. But again, I, as just one vote, am reluctant and actually refused to pass the costs of these things on to the taxpayers. I wasn't going to make, or I wasn't going to vote to make the taxpayers pay for, frankly, a failure in Hartford. So even though, as I said, some of these, well, all of these are painful to see go, I don't see where we have a lot of other choices. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on items 1 through 15? Alderman Wilson.
So I will echo Alderman DeLucia's sentiment that this is, of course, painful, but at the same time, this is what we were elected to do. And we cannot pass the burden off to taxpayers, especially in the middle of trying to bounce back from a COVID-19 pandemic. I think the other thing to look at, I'm an optimistic individual, is to look at, although some of these projects, I look at in the capital are not going to be funded, or even some positions, there are opportunities when we look at the ARP funding and other sources to go in other places, to get some things done. You know, the other thing that I look at, you know, when it comes to the cuts is the great length that the multicultural developmental program has done for the city over the last few years. So there are some opportunities through that and other ways to make that still work and be a reality. Part of this is us rolling up our sleeves and being creative. But it's us being responsible tonight and making sure that we do what's best for the taxpayers here in the city of Norwich. But I think the one thing that also needs to be said is that just because some of these expenditures are cut now, we have an opportunity through other funds coming to the city to possibly do some of these things. So just because they're not funded doesn't mean we can't make a way, but also this means that we've got to do some planning. And I'm not going to sit up here and point fingers on it's Hartford's fault or anyone's fault. We've got to do the adult thing and do what's best for the city at this point. I will say we were right in delaying the vote on this budget a week. As we can see, it made a huge difference. And we're not scrambling at the last minute to fix a hole in it. So this allows us to be realistic before tax bills go out and what we have as a city. But also it makes us do a little work moving forward to make sure that some of these areas are met. And I think, you know, we've got systems in place to continuously look at these things. As I said, the finance subcommittee of the council, the ad hoc committee that was formed of the Board of Ed and the council to look at these things as the year goes on. So I would say my piece would also be, it is our duty to continuously meet and look to see where we are, just in case additional funds come in, but even just to see where we are as a city, because that is the also ultimate piece, is making sure that we are operating as a city to the best of our ability for each and every taxpayer. So the work isn't done tonight. This is just the beginning. And we just have to continue to be creative to make the city of Norwich the place that we want families to move. So thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Alderman Gould?
So I'm not going to be so nice and say it is Hartford's fault. There isn't anybody else to blame for this. It's not our fault. This is Hartford's fault. So let's, you know, got to take the blame for doing this. We were prudent in waiting a week to pass our budget, to wait until today to pass our budget, because otherwise we'd be sending out supplemental tax bills to people in January. But this is Hartford's fault. It's not ours. So I have no problem laying the blame at their feet. And if we're going to talk about things that hurt, 1, 2, 4, 8, 10, they hurt. They sting. They slap me in the face. But this is our reality. And I'm sorry that 1, 2, 4, 8, 10, it's a killer. But this is our reality. And I hope Hartford straightens themselves out. I really do. That's all I have to say.
Thank you again. The motion or the discussion right now is on items 1 through 15. Alderman Nash.
Yeah, just, again, to echo the sentiments before this, but we've been here before, and with the budgets, I've sat here for a while now and heard that, you know, this is the worst, this is the worst, this is the worst. Well, you know, I've been through, this is the 12th budget, and it's been the worst. And it just keeps being I don't know where it's going to go after this. I mean, what's next year going to be? I won't be here, but, oh gosh. But anyway, they're all hard to take. But I've sat here and watched our department heads. I've watched our schools. I've watched them take what crumbs we could give them to keep the taxpayers from, as one of our constituents say, eating cat food in the dark, to keep them from doing that. And this is how we have to do it. And I'm really sorry for all the cuts, 1 through 15. And I know this is going to be tough, and I'm also optimistic in the point where hopefully in 3 or 4 months, we can turn around and say, oh, look, we got some money that we didn't expect, and we can restore some of these items. You know, we've been here before, folks, and the sky didn't fall on us. We just got to tighten our belt, figure out how to do it. Some of these agencies can handle the cut a little better than other agencies because of their larger budgets and more flexibility with what they can do with their budget. But no matter who it is, it's going to hurt them. And I just want to say that I appreciate Josh and John Salomon's diligence on the budget, and I'm sure that, you know, they're money men, and so, you know, I'm sure they took great time and effort into coming up with these cuts so that it wouldn't hurt so bad, but just sting a little bit. So I just want to say thank you to you two guys for it, and I would just say, hang in there, everyone. Good luck, and I have total, absolute faith in our department heads and our city employees, and you know, taxpayers. We're doing our best up here to keep you guys above water, but it's getting harder and harder every year. So, thank you.
Thank you. Again, the motion before us is to adopt the expenditure changes 1 through 15. President Pro Tem.
So I, for one, do not you know, Hartford, yeah, in general, but I think what we have is what I refer to as a process failure. So in that often it's communications. So my understanding is that when we got the pilot money, the additional funds and pilot money, that the distressed municipalities grant at that point was off the table. So whether CCM failed or to let us know who we get a lot of our information from, or whether it's a responsibility of our legislators, I'm not positive. But I think, unfortunately, what happens with the revenue numbers with the state, I mean, the only number we get is the governor's budget initially, and that's what basically, you know, they're going by. So, and as that fleshes out in various committees and stuff, people try to keep up with what's going on. So you know, it's very difficult to fault the people sitting here with that process. So, you know, and so you know, this is why I refer to it as a process failure. It's not a failure of the personnel involved, really. It's a failure of the process. So you probably need a better way to do it, and we're going to have to talk about that. I think that's a conversation we're going to have with Hartford, I think, in the future. So, but that being as it may, the issues before us is 1 through 15. I will say that I think we've gotten an increase in pilot money. So, I mean, we forget that $3.5 million was softened by that, and we will get additional pilot money next year, and that money will remain in the budget. The money in the grants were one-time additions to the budget, and that, while it might have helped us this year, it wouldn't help us next year, or it would, because we would be getting some money next year, but if in the original budget. But the pilot money will stay, and it will increase at least next year anyway, and then it'll at least be that amount in the future. So I would much rather have a reoccurring source of revenue than a one-time stream any day of the week. So, you know, for that I credit our legislative group in Hartford that cover this district. They've been fairly responsive, I think, and certainly they took my calls over the weekend, and I'm sure a lot of other people were calling them. So. I, like everyone else, hate the idea of these cuts. I'm a big fan of Otis Library, and I've supported giving them more money in the past, and I don't like any of this stuff here, obviously, but I agree, too, also that it's necessary and that we can't be passing this kind of, you know, total amount onto the taxpayer, especially in a, you know, what I would call a somewhat depressed economy. I'm hopeful that, you know, we'll get by this, and, you know, down the road, you know, maybe next year or the next year after that, we'll be able to do something a little more and get some other things done. But I don't see where, if we're going to be responsible in our governance, that we can afford to spend these funds. So, so all these there are several new positions here that we certainly wanted to fund, but that's not going to happen. So those are the first things that come out, and that's the way it should be. But there's other things here. Alderwoman Gould mentioned number 4, which is a reduction of the NCDC funding. They desperately need an increase in funding, but I just don't see a way of doing that right this second. So that come out. And there's several other pieces in here that I would certainly rather have in here or even invest more money into, but that can't happen right now. So I don't think it's a question of apologizing for that or anything else. It's just the way it is. We just can't afford to do it. So I'll support the removal of 1 through 15, and I'm sure everyone else will probably be doing that also. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman DeLucia.
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles.
Yes.
Alderman Wilson.
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould.
Yes.
Alderman Nash.
Yes.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt.
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom.
Yes.
That's 7-0.
Motion to accept the expenditure cuts of 1 through 15 is adopted on a 7-0 vote. Pro Tem.
On the question of item 16, I would encourage my fellow members of the council to reject item 16 and restore that funding. Obviously, we've had this long discussion over ECS funding. I am confident that we have an understanding with the board. I'm not going to make you say anything again. Make the sign of the cross or something, or whatever you might be into. I don't know.
I didn't
But
ask
anyway.
that. The Jewish
Oh, yeah,
council didn't ask that.
But in all seriousness, so I agree with the mayor in that if we're going to restore it as ECS funding, then that should go to the schools. I can appreciate the city manager's sentiment because, to be honest with you, I tossed the idea around in my head when I originally thought it was going to be ECS money, whether or not it all had to be allocated to the schools, So it certainly crossed my mind. I don't want you. I'd be lying if I said it didn't, but I certainly, in looking at it, believe that funding should go to the schools. So, and that's what I support, and I'm going to ask everyone else to support that move. Thank you. So reject number 16. So it would be a no vote.
Excuse me, do you have the maker and the second of that motion to reject item 16?
It's a division, Peter. It's a question. It's a divided question.
You don't need it, okay.
I don't need it, no.
So you're counting
I
it
have
as the
the
first and the
original
second, okay, that's fine.
Original motion from.
Is there further discussion? Yes, Alderman DeLucia.
Do we need a caveat attached to this, that it's contingent upon the ECS funding coming in?
We can't make a caveat.
And what if the ECS funding is somewhat less than $1.240 million?
Then we have an understanding that they're not going to spend it.
Go back and look at the council.
Well, I'll say that, to me, it's not a matter of trust, because I think we've gone a long way to build a lot of trust with the...
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude and interrupt, but since we took a vote on items 1 through 15 being adopted and the vote was announced, we do need a second on this motion to reject item 16, because we took a final vote on items 1 through 15.
The question is now divided into two.
Yeah, but I think the question.
We put the whole,
I think the question was to
Your
approve.
division is correct, but because we put the rest, the motion on 1 to 15 to be adopted,
All
and
right,
the
then
vote
I
was
would-
announced,
all right.
we need a second.
all right,
So,
then if we don't,
please.
if we don't have a second, then the piece dies?
Someone can make a motion and second you made a motion to reject 16, I just need someone to second
No,
it.
okay.
That's all.
No, what I'm saying is, okay. So I make a motion to reject number 16.
And could I have a second, please? Alderman Nash. Thank you. Is there further discussion? I apologize, Alderman DeLucia. But Mike and I were going back and forth.
Make sure we
and
do it
We
right.
wanted to be, as far as the council record, years later to reflect that someone actually made a motion and seconded it to reject 16. That would not appear in the record otherwise.
You see, the motion is to adopt the.
This motion is to
entire- all the-
reject his expenditure cut of
Can
item
I say my
16.
point of order, please?
Sure.
So the motion was to adopt this in total.
That's my understanding was.
Right.
Initially,
And
but
then-
then you divided.
And then I divided the
Yes.
question
Divided
into the
question.
two pieces.
Yes.
So there, we would vote on, and we've done this many times.
Yep.
Then we would simply vote on the two pieces. So this was on the table when we put the whole thing on the table.
You could vote, assuming that the vote is to reject 16.
Yes.
Based on that original motion. I think you could do that, but I think you want to make sure that it's clear.
Okay, no, I mean, see, that's fine.
Just
If you want to do it that way, to be clear, that's fine. But, you know, I thought that's why I wanted to speak first, so it would be clear that, you know, the idea would be to reject that piece and division. But I'm fine with it either way. So that's good. The motion on the table then is to reject 16.
Seconded by Alderman Nash. That is correct. Alderman DeLucia, the floor is yours. I apologize again.
Thank you. So, as I was saying, this is not a matter of trust because I believe that we've built a considerable amount of trust in the last 2 years through the conversations and the actions of the ad hoc committee. So my concern is this, that that this will be calculated in the tax levy, even though we anticipate it being, let's say, covered by an ECS grant. And that we will not be able to undo that tax levy when and if the ECS money does come in.
If it does come in, we're fine.
Right.
We're voting on a tax levy tonight.
Right.
We can't. We're going to just send everybody a rebate check?
No, I don't understand.
So if this ECS grant is strictly an ECS grant and not an ECS Alliance grant, then
There's nothing else to do.
the increase in revenues offsets the increase in expenditures.
Right. It's covered.
It'll be a wash.
It will be covered. If it's Alliance, it's not.
Okay. We'll see. So when Josh does the math and tells me that the mill rate is going to be something other than what we discussed prior to this meeting, then we're going to have a problem.
All right, well then, Josh, could you figure it out right now, quick? We'll give you as much time as you need on your computer.
That's not before us.
Yeah,
That is out of order.
no.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
but it's not.
Then I would motion to appeal the ruling of the chair, because it's certainly in order.
My reference is the adoption of the mill rate that Josh calculates when we're all done is not in front of us right now.
No, it's not. But the information that generates is needed to make the decision. So, in my opinion, it would be in order.
Would you like a recess so that he can calculate it?
How long is it going to take you, Josh?
It's done.
I think you have a spreadsheet set up, I'm sure, you know? You just plug in the numbers, so.
Clicks.
Good, what we got?
Please provide the answer for Alderman DeLucia.
So with removing this $1,240,000 expenditure cut would put the mill rate at 41.98 mils as compared to 42.06 mils from the current fiscal year in the general fund.
Okay, so it would be a reduction?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to reject item 16. Alderman Wilson.
Just to kind of reiterate my point before, I think we've got the system in place if things go differently, but I think we've got a mutual understanding and system in place And, you know, I think education has done a phenomenal job over the last year or so, given the circumstances. And I think knowing, you know, working in education and knowing that these students are in a different spot than most would anticipate. If you haven't been in a school in the last year or so, you wouldn't understand the reasoning for some of these funds. I think, you know, some have the idea that the additional funds that they're going to get can cover all of these things, but I think it's our duty to make sure we are producing the best and brightest students we can have. So that's one of the reasons why I support rejecting this.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the motion to reject item 16? If not, roll call, please.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Nash?
Yes.
Alderman President Pro Tem Betancourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
That's 7-0.
Motion to reject item 16 of the expenditure cuts passes 7-0 for the record. Is there further discussion on the budget as amended? Yes, Alderman Wilson.
I just think that the point, you know, that we've made is, although we had to make cuts to the budget, we did our responsibility of being responsible to the taxpayers and each and every person here in the city, and that we are going to do the best that we can with the cards that we've been dealt, but that tonight is not the only time. We will continue to work on making sure we're doing the right thing, that this is still a process, as there are still bills and things that need to be sorted out in Hartford that could impact us, but that we're going to continue to do each and everything to make sure we're doing what's best for each and every taxpayer.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the budget as amended? Seeing none, roll call.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Nash?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Betancourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
That's 7-0.
Motion passes 7-0. Budget is adopted.
Number 2, relative to the adoption of the appropriations ordinance for fiscal year 2021-22.
Motion to bring this to the floor, please. Alderman Wilson, second by Alderwoman Ella Miles. Is there discussion? Do you need time?
Nope, I can.
Okay.
Ready, Betsy?
Ready.
So, in section 1, the mill rate should be 41.98 mils.
Can you say that one more time?
Are we in 2 or?
We're on 3.
That's
3?
3,
Okay.
Josh.
Yeah, you're in 3, Josh.
Yeah.
I don't think we're there yet.
Nope.
We're on the appropriation.
Oh,
Sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
The total combined appropriation is $145,676,545, and that's a combination of general fund, town consolidation district, and city consolidation district.
Repeat that one more time, slower, please.
Sure. $145,676,545.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Nash?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Betancourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
That's 7-0.
Motion passes on Resolution 2, adoption of the appropriations ordinance for fiscal year 21-22 passes 7-0.
Sorry. Number 3, relative to the adoption of the tax levy ordinance for fiscal year 2021-22.
Motion, please, to bring this forward. Alderman Ella Miles, second Alderman Nash. The floor to Josh, please.
Okay, so Section 1, the mill rate is 41.98 mils. Section 2, the mill rate is 0.37 mils. Section 3, the mill rate is 6.66 mils.
But,
Could make it 667.
Could we, like, I don't know, hire another fireman or something, fire somebody? I don't know. I don't like it.
Section 4, please.
Is 3.02 mils.
Is there discussion or question?
Do we need to make a motion to amend the?
Sorry, he has his. Oh, sorry, Joe had his hand. Alderman DeLucia, please.
So I just want to be clear about something, Josh. I'm just comparing this to current fiscal year.
Yes.
So Section 1 is a decrease from 42.72.
It's a decrease from 42.06 to 41.98.
Eight hundredths.
Okay. Section 2 remains the same.
It's, yeah, 0.37 mils is the same mill rate that was in the tentatively adopted budget, but it's a 0.05 mil increase from the current fiscal year, which was 0.32 mils.
That's right. Just not calling.
So I'm looking at page Roman numeral 4 of our budget book. Roman numeral 4 are the current mill rates in the city of Norwich. No?
Total.
The 2021-22 budget, right? So, yes, those are the mill rates that were included in the manager's proposed budget.
Right.
But the mill rate has decreased a little bit since then.
Okay, so in section 2, I missed what you said about about 0.32.
37. It stays the same.
Yeah, that's what I thought I said. I
3.2
heard
to
him say
3.7.
3.2, but it is 3.7, it stays the same.
If I may, the proposed budget the city manager provided to us had additional further less spending or greater cuts, which provided a proposed 0.32 mill rate in the category he's outlining. We're adopting one at 0.37, which is basically equal where it was last year.
Okay.
Actually, flip-flop, it's 0.32 in the current fiscal year. Next year, it's 0.37.
So that's,
The change was primarily caused by the increase in the tax abatement, the volunteer firefighter tax abatement.
That's right.
Okay. So section 3, 6.73 compared to what you just gave us, 6.66?
6.66.
So a decrease in the CCD as well?
But an increase over the current year. So I'm sorry, this is the manager's proposed budget from April. So I'm comparing the budget that you just adopted to the current year's adopted budget. So that's the difference for the comparison.
Okay, so and I apologize for laboring over this, but I want to be perfectly clear for the onslaught of emails that are going to show up tomorrow. So so for section 1, the current mill rate is 42.06.
Correct.
And the section 2, the current is 0.32.
Correct.
Thank you. In section 3, the current is fill in the blank.
6.41.
6.41. And in section 4, the current is,
2.94.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. I'm sorry. Pro Tem. You had asked for the floor, but he had his hand up.
No, I think,
Okay.
at this point, it's just a numbers thing, so I'm good.
Is there further discussion on Old Business Resolution 3? Seeing none, roll call.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes?
Alderman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Nash?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt?
Yes?
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
7-0.
Motion to table? No, I want to.
I'm sorry, louder. But, well, first of all, those other resolutions have not been called, therefore, if they're ignored, they're gone. It achieves the same purpose, simply motion to...
Motion to adjourn.
That's it? Is there a second?
No. I could.
What's it?
Just withdraw.
You want to withdraw motion? Okay. For the record, those two other resolutions of the new business, at the request of a sponsor, myself, that they be withdrawn, so the record reflects that.
Yes?
I don't need a second.
No, I mean, you can withdraw them, that's your...
Don't need a
prerogative.
second for that, but it's on the record. I ask that they be withdrawn, so they're disposed of. Which now,
Again, a motion to adjourn.
is there a second? Alderman Ella Miles, second. Roll call.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes?
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Nash?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
7-0.
Motion to adjourn passes 7-0.